So my name is Minna Saariketo. I have a double affiliation. As introduced, I'm currently working at Aalto University in the Department of Computer Science and doing my PhD at the University of Tampere. My background is in media studies, so I'm a social scientist. Today's speech on reclaiming control, negotiations, and the places of mobile technology in daily life is at the heart of my research interest. I have been in the past years studying what does agency mean for people in these times when our daily life is filled with technology that is shaping and organizing and steering our actions in many different ways. The question of how people understand their possibilities of action in these digital environments and what do they consider as the constraints posed by these digital environments is what I'm interested in. The question of reclaiming control is very interesting and important to researchers and designers as well, because it can point to the things that people think that they would need help with in living their daily life in the way that they find meaningful and valuable. I'm going to present today based on an experimentation and research intervention that I did last autumn. It's part of a project called Digital Face. In this project, we try to understand what is digital face from two interrelated perspectives. We have been looking at how our physical faces are transformed into digital environments. Here my colleague Asko Lehmuskallio has done some interesting things in interviewing people who were designing and involved in the design of the very first Nokia camera phone, looking at how the human face was brought into the screen of the first camera phone. And my research is linked with the second question on people's negotiations with digital technology and the interaction that they have. The way I approach the question is not so much from the point of view of the face, but of people's understandings of the digital environment and how they experience it. The background is in the observation how our daily life is infused with portable, always-on and network devices, how it has become almost impossible not to leave digital traces of the daily life. And although computer code mediates almost everything that we do, still in the daily life of average users, the way it shapes our actions very often goes unnoticed. Based on previous research, it has been shown how people are dimly aware of what data is collected on them, how it is used, and with whom it is shared. So I was interested in finding out how people reflect on data collected on them in these digital environments. The inspiration for my research experiment was the idea of so-called privacy mirrors from computer science, the ideas that by visualizing something that is not easily perceivable to people, we could enable new kind of reflexivity. The concrete way how I executed my experiment was by asking my participants to track all of their ICTs for 1 week. For smartphones and computers, they were using freely available self-tracking software such as App Usage, Realize D, Rescue Time, and Manic Time, so recording how often, for how long, and for what purposes they were using their devices. This was especially interesting because when we think about our mediated routines, they are spread out throughout the day. They are not so easy for people to reflect themselves because they are routines happening without so much conscious thought, but also from the research point of view, thinking how the use is spread out throughout the day, it would be awkward for both the researcher and the participants having a researcher observing the day. And media diary was an important part of construction of this reflexive mirror, because it gave the participants a chance to write down their own observations, their feelings, and things that the trackers were not recording. After this tracking period, I met with my participants for an interview. We were talking about ICTs in their everyday life, tracking as an experience, and their thoughts on the connectivity, on data mining, and their hopes for change. This interview was an important part because I was interested in how people reflect on their daily life and not so much analyzing what was in their data. So interested how they interpret their own data. And when my analysis was ready, I wanted to involve them in the interpretative process and ask for their feedback on my results. I had 13 participants, 8 women and 5 men, with the focus on people who self-identify as having an intense relationship with digital technology, especially with social media, both at work and on leisure time. They had a variety of professions, from priest to software developer, and from hairdresser to communications freelancer. Their constellations of digital devices in their daily life were quite different. There were some who were mainly using smartphone and occasionally computer when needed, and others who had several smartphones, several tablets, several laptops and computers at use, a smart TV and a smart watch. And the way they described their relationship to their devices were quite different. There were ones who were identifying as being pioneers of technology use, proud of kind of setting the way that technology is used, and others who said that their relationship is very neutral, kind of confused with the idea that, am I really having a relationship with my devices? And then others who were struggling in finding a way that they would like with their own use. Thinking about what my motivation in initiating this experiment was, I was hoping that the visualization of the digital everyday life would provoke some reflexivity on the tight hold that tech giants are having of people's everyday life and how it is steering them. In this sense, my experiment was not a success. It seemed to my participants the kind of data mining operations and the involvement of tech giants in their daily life is so normalized and taken for granted that they didn't really find a need to reflect about it more and to kind of reclaim control in this sense. What software developer Jesse was saying is somehow summarizing the common attitude that my participants had. What he said was that Google and Facebook know pretty well who I am, what I like, what I do, and what is worth advertising to me. But I have taken a stand that I don't care because it's very difficult to escape these days. It is easier for me just to let them harvest data and not to stress about it. Although this was not so surprising to me, I was still left wondering about the kind of lack of emotion that was there, how taken for granted this was to people. So I wanted to take another look at my data and see what it is that people do feel emotional about their everyday life, what it is that they find a need to reclaim control. And there was a common theme. and it was the question of time. People were talking about the temporalities of their daily life, how digital technology is bringing in new rhythms to their everyday life, and how it is changing and interfering with the rhythms that they are used to. Actually, looking at the motivations of my participants to be part of this experiment was to learn more of how they are using their devices and where do they spend their time on. Some of them were looking for a way to handle the hard-to-handle daily life with their digital devices. And from the point of view of reclaiming control, there were two main ways that they were talking about it. Reclaiming control with digital technology of their hectic everyday life, and reclaiming control back from digital technology to live their everyday life in a more meaningful way. So when they were talking about the fluency of their everyday life, it was very clear when they were reflecting with the tracked data that it's intertwined to different applications and network connections in many, many ways. In fact, it seemed that it has become almost impossible for them to imagine a life without network connections and devices. When they forgot their smartphone home, it was broken or lost, or when there was no network connection, it felt as one was handless or naked or in the dark, pointing to the feeling of smartphone being like an extension to the body. When they were talking about the kind of happiness and joy and easiness that they experienced, the help that they were getting to their daily life, it was intertwinement of digital technology to all of the routines of the daily life, from waking up to keeping company when having the morning coffee or when commuting, organizing the workday, when relaxing or entertaining you when you were bored, assisting to fall asleep, or even waking up in the middle of the night to answer some messages if there were any. So the appreciation for digital technology came from the fact of how it was helping to organize and manage the daily life, to remember things, to schedule, to socialize when the contacts were not close by, and to relax. Communications freelancer Anna was one of my participants who was most proud of being a technology pioneer. She was using in average 5 hours of social media every day, being very proud of knowing what is going on in her networks. She participated in the research because she wanted to argue against the negative atmosphere that is there against intensive computer use. She felt that she had to be responding to people's moral panic when this is the direction where society is going, but people are not really ready for it yet. For her, the way to reclaim control in the very connected daily life was Pinterest. It was a place just for her because her network was not there to communicate with her. Sarah is working as a priest and she is a mother of 2. For her, the experiment was a way to get confidence that although she had many devices in her daily life, she had found a convenient and useful way to use them all. The main observation for her from the experiment was that she was using her smartphone, especially when she was with her children. And this was like reaching the top level in guilt. But it was also a moment for her when she decided and realized that she refuses to feel guilty anymore, that this was her way of living and being. So living the hectic life with the 2 children, she enjoyed the moments in between household chores when she could be just drowning herself into the Facebook newsfeed. Or she described herself as an impatient person who had hated queuing before, but now having the chance to play a few games of Candy Crush while waiting, it was not so unpleasant to her anymore. Or the moment when she was putting her children to sleep, the routines were done, but it was taking time and she had to be there. So it was calming her that she could be reading the discussion forum that was very important to her. So her example is pointing at least 2 dimensions of reclaiming control. Having the space in your daily life to kind of take a break from what is going on, and reclaiming control in the sense of refusing to feel guilty and kind of talking back to the normative discourses of how device use should look like. Hairdresser Julia was describing a conflicted relationship to her smartphone use. She was saying that she was quite annoyed of being so attached to her mobile phone. She said that she realized that she is working with the phone quite a lot, but at the same time reflecting that maybe she's using this as an excuse to be more attached to her phone. As her work was customer situations and the incoming phone calls and messages were disrupting this flow, she was thinking of reclaiming control of this situation by buying a smartwatch. That way she could control better which phone calls and messages are ones that she wants to react to and which ones she can ignore. But I'm thinking that maybe exactly because it has become so indispensable to people, because people are experiencing the usefulness of ICTs in such a profound way, they have also introduced chaos and difficulties to people's daily life, need to renegotiate the place again. My participants were talking about the irritatingly easy presence of smartphone in their daily life that was interrupting and disrupting the daily flows. They were talking about feeling losing control, of chaos, and being burdened by their digital everyday life. With the dozens of apps filled with promises of utility and inscribed with their own models of time consumption, the digital daily life has become quite difficult to handle for many of the people participating in my research. Youth worker Olivia was describing this from one point of view in her media diary. She was talking about her multi-screened multimedia and fast-paced work that made her feel tired. Simultaneously, she was answering emails, chatting with the youngster on WhatsApp, updating iPad and having face-to-face conversations with a co-worker, saying that no wonder that in the end of the day she felt like her knob was tilting. But the exhaustive feelings of my participants were not only caused with the multiple screens and the multitasking of their everyday life, but also resulting from the multiplicity of platforms that they wanted to follow, the pressures to keep up with the developments of technology, to know what is trending, what new useful things are out there, the constant need to learn more and to keep up, and the obligations to be connected to the endless information flows. The distressful experiences were caused by the disruptions and the difficulties to concentrate and to do what people were planning to do in their daily life. And this was shared by most of the participants. One of the most distressed was researcher Rosa. She was describing how she felt that she was hooked. She was talking about the role of social media in her daily life, how she wanted to follow what is going on there, but then in the middle of her work days, she realized that she was ending up spending more time that she had planned, kind of ending up wandering around and getting lost. She felt the pressure from her colleagues who were active in social media, and she felt that she needs to contribute more as well, to be more active and to comment as well. She had used a social media consultant to get a sense of how to handle this better. But the solutions that she had gotten from the consultant were taking too much of her time as well. She was shocked with the time that she was spending on her smartphone every day, being more than 4 hours every day. She thought that it was too big a chunk of her daily life compared to all the things that she also wanted to do. What she experimented with during the experiment was using an application that blocked her access to social media in the mornings when she wanted to get the day going and during the work day to help her concentrate. But something of the level of being hooked is demonstrated in that she found a back door to access Facebook anyways. And as a last example, I have web designer Daniel, who was describing in the interview how before he had felt quite distressed with the amount of time that he was spending on computer. The problem there was that he wasn't really valuing what he was doing there, that it was just surfing. This was the experience that many of my participants had, especially linked with social media, that they felt that it was loitering and a waste of time for them. Daniel had to quite strong measures to reclaim control of his everyday life. He had spent a 2-week holiday at the summer cottage and left all of his network devices at home. Because of this experience of having more time to think and to do what he wanted to do, he was thinking of giving up his smartphone altogether, changing it to a basic kind of model. He liked YouTube videos a lot and had been thinking about starting making them himself as well, but realizing that this would introduce another aspect to his daily life when he would be attached to his computer even more, he had given up the idea. Other participants had done similar kind of restrictions as well. Researcher Sofia had been struggling in understanding what the usefulness of Twitter could be, but realizing that it could introduce an aspect of too much time consuming in her daily life, she had given it up. Restaurant manager Leo had to be available in his daily life all the time. So he was choosing holiday destinations without network connection so that at least during holidays he could be unreachable. And in the family of software developer Jesse, they had decided that smart devices don't enter the bedroom and the dinner table. So, to conclude, the examples from my data show 2 main ways that my participants were thinking about reclaiming control. reclaiming control of the hectic everyday life with the help of digital technology, and reclaiming control back from it because it is occupying a space in their daily life that they don't feel comfortable with. So I would like to ask you, what do you think that could be the means that design could help people to reclaim control in their daily life? Thank you.
Thank you so much for a really interesting topic that I think everyone can kind of feel like it's something they're struggling with or dealing with as well. We have quite a few questions online, so how about we start with those, and then if there are any in the room, we'll pass the mic around. First, actually, do you want to come this way? Because that thing is quite a blocky bit. There's an anonymous question that says, social media seems to make people miserable, and there is some research on this. Can you speculate what's the cause?
Well, based on my data, like how my participants were talking about the presence of social media in their everyday life, it's kind of the issues that are also around in media, feeling that the way people are presenting themselves in media is such a positive way that the struggles in one's own life somehow seem to be bigger, and it seems that everyone else is succeeding. So kind of feeling that the life other people are sharing is not really corresponding to the reality. But I think the kind of question of feeling miserable, based on these observations with data and time consumption, it also feels that people are losing the control of doing what they want to do because they feel that they need to spend time in social media more than they would like to. Yeah.
Do you see there's like a difference? Because people always bring up these like techno panics that have happened in history. You know, books were meant to like melt our brains, and TV was going to pacifize us. Is there something that makes this particularly different?
Well, that's a hard question. I don't know. Thinking about all the panics that have been there, there are definitely similar kinds of trends here. So I think we can evaluate it better maybe in 20 years, seeing how things have turned out. I don't think I can identify something that is so drastically different if we look at the big picture.
Another question online is, what is the most negative aspect of people being addicted to their smartphones? For example, parents who ignore their children or something along those lines.
Well, there's definitely a good example there, but I think it is difficult kind of to evaluate what is most negative. I think it goes back to people's experiences of their daily life. It can be very negative for themselves, but of course, thinking that we are living a social life, other peoples are affected as well. And I think these kind of negotiations that my participants were having within their family, for example, of deciding that certain areas in the home are restricted, that they don't bring any smart devices, there are kind of an example of showing how people are trying to change the situation.
Kind of related, actually. These kind of dovetail very nicely. You said people felt naked when they realized they didn't have a phone to use. I think I at least can kind of relate very strongly with that. Did the feeling change after the initial shock? For example, did they feel relieved at some point for not being to be so active? You mentioned, I think it was Daniel who went to his summer cottage.
Yeah, I think they are kind of different situations when you have a broken device, so when you forget it and kind of realize that it's not there, and you have things that you would like to do, or know that your children are okay. There was a mother who had a very allergic child, so for her to be available all the time was very important. So not having the network connection and not having the device when you're supposed to could pose really big problems. But then simultaneously there are the experiments that people are doing of deciding not to use the device and kind of realizing that there is a space to negotiate the relationship again. So it's a different story. And there the feelings of kind of having space to think and having space to do the things that you want to do better. So we're kind of giving them a chance to think that maybe in the kind of hectic everyday life, they want to negotiate the role again. Yeah.
Awesome. We don't have any more questions online, but do we have some in the room?
Yeah.
Right there. Can we get a microphone, please? Just a sec.
All right. Hi. Thank you for an interesting speech. Relating to the question of regaining back control, once people had decided their bedroom or dinner table was off limits, how did it go forward? Did they give up on the idea, or did they actually regain control?
I think it was very interesting the way he was describing it was that first they limited the bedroom as the area where they are not having smart devices and having their smartphones and tablets on the kitchen table, and then gradually also including the kitchen table as an area where they are not having the devices. In this family, I think linked with our media culture, an interesting discussion was that in the dinner table, it was okay to read newspaper, but it was not okay to have the smartphone and maybe to read the news from there. So I think there was something interesting there on the kind of valuations and maybe also of the kind of ideas of what is hooking attention and what is not in that sense. But in this case, in this example, they felt that they could benefit from these restrictions and to kind of at least settle the family situation so that they had less arguments.
One
Second
question. How about you? Have you found the balance with your devices?
I'm struggling. I think I'm one of the people who feel that I have to follow certain things because I have been studying Facebook. I feel that I need to know what's going on there, but at the same time, I would very much like to stop using it altogether. As part of this experiment, I was using all these different self-tracking applications that are available, and I think that I gained some new insights to the ways that I'm using devices. And it is very difficult to say in my case what I think that would be the ideal, because like some of my participants, I know that I'm working with the devices, but at the same time, I feel that they are occupying too much space in my daily life.
Yeah, great question. Do you have someone else? Yes. Hi.
Hi.
Hey. So I was wondering, do you already have questions based on your findings, like new ones to research next?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. I was quite doing my academic work. What I was interested in was the question of rhythms, inspired by the rhythm analysis of a sociologist called Henri Lefebvre, the idea of how we live in rhythms, and looking at it, how my participants were talking about their daily life, what I would like to analyze next are the rhythms that are inscribed in different technologies, in different social media platforms, how they try to manage people's use of time, what kind of tricks and design choices they are using to capture people's attention.
Great. Do we have any more questions in the audience? No. I have a question for you.
Okay.
Reaktor, the company that's putting on this conference, designs and builds digital services that people use. Do you have any tips, kind of based on your research, for us as designers, for how can we be more mindful of the fact that we're hogging up a lot of attention of our users? Is there something we can do?
I think the kind of thing that could be kept in mind is that people's daily life comprise of many, many different things. And then the kind of idea that your application, the new utility that you hope that people will use, will occupy a certain space. So thinking of what that is and how it can help people to reclaim control in either of the senses that I was talking about.
Awesome. Right. It's not just Instagram. It's the fact that you have Instagram and Facebook and Candy Crush and so on and so forth. Awesome. Is there somewhere we can go to find out more about you or your research?
Well, I have uploaded some of my articles in academia.edu. The new ones are not published yet, but hopefully will be soon, and I will provide information on their locations, how they can be read on that site.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We'll be looking out for those. Thank you, Minna.
Thank you.